You are in for a treat. These two very experienced ladies are going to be talking about the heart and soul of supporting each other, and that's so important. So it's really good that you're here. My name is Mary Lynn Rush, and I'm sponsoring this workshop because I really believe in this model, and I believe in them, and I believe in the power of community, and that we die in community, and that we need community to support each other when we die and when we're caring for those who are dying. So I am Mary Lynn Rush of Lifespan Doula Association. We train end-of-life doulas. The definition of the end-of-life doula is very broad and encompasses the whole pan-death experience from as early as diagnosis to through after-death care and bereavement. And you can find out more about us at lifespandoulas.com. And I hope you picked up one of those diagrams about with the pretty blue circle and the green circles around it and the definition and all that. So I don't need to say a whole lot more about what doulas are, just that I think that everything you're going to be talking about today is encompassed within the doula model of care, and we're very strong in the doula model of care and scope of practice. So check out our website to learn more about that. So take it away. Yay.
It's Tilly. Am I live, Bob? Great, thank you. So welcome everyone, and thank you, Mary Lynn Rush, for sponsoring this session on how to start a threshold support group. My name is Kim Adams, and I'm here in Baltimore with the Threshold Support Circle. I'm the advisory board member, here with my colleague, the starter of the Threshold, Lee Hoyt, who will introduce herself in a minute. And we actually have another advisory board member here, Sharon Moore, and one of our members, Holly Fitzpatrick. So welcome to everyone. And today we're, as Mary Lynn said, we're really talking about a model that of support. And that can take many forms. So just to kind of begin to kind of set the stage here, kind of set the container for our time together, there's just a couple of pieces that just from the get-go, this is not a linear process. So if any of you are thinking, you know what, I'm going to come to the how to start a threshold support circle and get a 10-step method, probably not going to happen. This is not the place. However, we're going to be talking a lot about pieces and parts, and there may be more questions that we'll be generating to encourage you to think about what's right for you in your community, in your area. And so just before we get started, we're just curious. How many of you actually are part of a threshold support group or circle or have started one in one form or another? Great. So 4 or 5 of you, what's the context? Is it based on a religious, spiritual community? Is it just a neighborhood piece? Is it connected with a hospice or hospital, your groups?
In our town, we just live in a really small community, and so it's about a lot of us are hospice workers, and we took the model of just our friends and families and trying to start there and see how it spreads out into the community.
Beautiful, thank you. Yeah, there's a couple hands over here. What's type of, if any?
I recently graduated from the Art of Dying Institute's program, the 90-hour training. And Jean Denny, who facilitated our training, talked about you all so much and encouraged us to do something similar. And in doing this work, I was already feeling like the only way to do it was really in a collective kind of structure for the work. But two other classmates of mine and more interested have come together, and we've started the process we're about to kind of launch, and I was sent here to learn from you.
Great. Oh, okay. We got a tough job, Lee. And there was one or two more. Yes, Peg.
Yeah, people have come to my workshops over the years around Eastern Massachusetts, and every once in a while somebody just comes like, you can see them coming from across the room, and they're like, afterwards. And I just know, man, they just got bitten by the bug, big time. And so I just kept a list of those names, and then recently just said, I just gotta pull these people together. There's an issue with geographical distance and everything, but are they willing to take everything I know, and I want to just give it to them, and so we're in that process.
Good,
but,
good. So I'm hearing a lot of community connections. Yeah. Was there one more person that? Yeah, Mary.
So a local UU community that I'm not a part of, but I know a lot of them, sponsored someone to come and do a home funeral training back in April, and that group wants to root itself as a collective to see what's next. So we're with the seeds planted, and I think some roots are growing, and we're really new in the what's calling to us, what are we trying to create here? We're at the very beginning.
Through the church community?
Yes.
Yes, great, great. So as you can already begin to see, there's a variety of ways. And so we're going to be talking a lot about kind of exploring and discovering some of those things. And throughout that, we're actually using a garden metaphor. So just kind of pay attention to some of those pieces that come up. And also throughout it, we'll be sharing our experience of the Threshold Support Circle and how we move through it. And actually, Lee will introduce yourself and begin us with that.
So I am a retired teacher, and when I retired from teaching, I got involved in hospice, and about the same time I got involved in Buddhism. So hospice and Buddhism go very nicely together, and I had a very early experience with a friend, Jennifer Downs, who was curious about second half of life issues, and inspired by Jung, she invited Beth Knox to come to Baltimore and do a one-day training about caring for your own at death. So with 20 some other people, I went to this workshop, and we sat in a circle. We heard her story about her daughter Allison and her discovery that we could care for our own. And she happens to be from Maryland, so we heard about we're from Baltimore, so we heard about the Maryland law. And we heard about the healing benefits of home funerals, and the ecological benefits and the financial benefits of home funerals. And we had a profound physical, shared, intimate experience, because she insisted that we bathe someone's feet, and that we lift a body in sheets rolled up in an envelope. And it was actually, that person is here at this conference. He is the casket maker. So he's very tall and kind of heavy. So anyway, we had that, what is the weight of the body experience. And it was unforgettable. We lifted him, we carried him around corners and downstairs and upstairs at a Waldorf school. And that too was really important, because that whole anthroposophical view of death, and of someone who after death remains in relationship with the beloved family. So all of the elements for our group, the seeds were planted in the soil there. So you'll see those recurring things of circle, of shared stories, of hands-on experience, and we also did reflective work in that time. So those are the elements that we're going to be taking a look at. So at the end of that experience, the group said, as we were sharing at the very end, where can we go to continue this conversation? We don't want to stop. And so Jennifer and I looked at each other and said, okay, we'll keep meeting. And we started meeting in homes and in public spaces, common lounges in a large apartment complex. Luckily, 2 people in the group were in their 90s. And they insisted that we become really well informed about this, because they wanted us to help them. And so one of these women was, I came to discover, a pioneer in Baltimore. She had been cutting edge in all kinds of movements in Baltimore. She, like me, was an educator, so we sort of had a natural bond. And she indeed was my first home funeral. But we were motivated to serve these elders. So we were lucky that we discovered what it meant to begin a threshold care group, a threshold support circle, as we came to name ourselves. We were lucky that the people who were drawn into this conversation in the beginning, into this learning experience, were included elders, they included a therapist, they included Buddhist practitioners who were used to contemplating death, and they included teachers, and they included nurses, and acupuncturists, and energy workers, and a lawyer, a potter, who was of an age that her friends were beginning to ask her, would you make an urn for me? And also a community activist. So it's kind of like when Peg, Lee mentioned, that the wisdom was in the room. And my guess is that that is the experience that you all will have also. There's always wisdom in the room. And like the body care being something that is already in us. It's a remembering process. The discovery of how to create a group is already in us, and so it's a matter of remembering, really. Sorry, I'm a retired English teacher, so the language is important. So forgive me for referring to notes. I mean, we could just stand up and dive into it, and eventually maybe I will. So the process for us was to educate ourselves, and once we were educating ourselves, we had to create groups, around these educational experiences. Jennifer is one of those. Let's do a program, and she's sort of the kick in the pants, and you sort of shoot from the hip kind of person. I'm an implementer, a detail person, so we were a good pair, and so we brought people to us. We discovered within our group we had a master gardener. And so we said, Tina, could you offer a training in creating sacred space using flower essences and herbs? We had a therapist who was also Buddhist, who was working at the Upaya Center with Joan Halifax. So we said, could you bring some contemplative practices to share with us? And so we educated ourselves, and we reached out to friends, and from our various, you can see we're quite a diverse group, we reached out to a number of different parts of the community in Baltimore. And so in the process of educating ourselves, we reached out to others, we built natural community, It was really a sort of the natural cycle of growth. It was really a sort of a spiral that got wider and wider and sent out, connections in many directions. And so like a community garden, we worked together, we brought our various skills, and it was a very organic process of growth and development. We edited, we redesigned as we went along. And we also discovered our roles as we went along. Jennifer insisted that we do the Myers-Briggs test. And she's Myers-Briggs. It was a little resistant, I'll admit. It was turned out to be very helpful. Pardon? We're not going to go into that. But suffice it to say that Jennifer and I are different types. We learned, and we were probably the most diverse in the group, most different from one another. And so it was really helpful, that process of leading together. I am a person who loves to work with another person or a couple of other people. So the advisory group for us is intimate. It's an intimate experience. It's a rich experience that nurtures us as we go along, I think. So we identified the roles as we went along. Do you want to Kim and Sharon are very good at creating the container, welcoming people, and taking care of the group as it moves along. They're energy workers. They're very sensitive to the energy of a group. And then there are the people who like to take notes and like to facilitate. And then there are the people who like to brainstorm what could be next. And there are the people who want to do a newsletter. And then there are people who are have technical savvy. And so eventually you will have a website, which struck terror in my heart because of my age and, you know.
Did you all decide on a mission or
getting ahead of ourselves.
before the roles were, like how did you, or was it an organic, did you figure out who's in the room, what does everyone want this group to be about?
Exactly. That's part of what we'll talk about. But it too was organic. Initially, the mission was, we want to learn more about this work. We want to continue the conversation about death and dying. We want to share in a sort of an intimate experience regularly, monthly. We committed to meeting monthly. We started in 2009, and we have been doing that, not every month, but once we started really doing programs, we needed to recover. So we don't necessarily meet every month, but we have been meeting regularly since 2009. So our mission came from the group, what the needs of the group were. It came from having elders and people in the group who wanted to take care of their parents. And so we very quickly realized that the whole advanced directive and planning would be important, and the skills of body care would be important. We all were very drawn to the contemplative, shared experience, reflective, a poem or an inspiration, and then reflection, and then sharing as a way to delve very deep inside. So very quickly we heard about the National Home Funeral Alliance, and I'm sure everybody here is a member, or if you're not, you will be really soon. And so we went to their second conference in Boulder, Jennifer and I, and that was when we discovered lineage. And of course, as a Buddhist, lineage is very important to me, but I think in many walks of life, lineage is the way that wisdom and skills are passed on. It's the way an intimate connection with things that we want to pass on, things that we are trying to remember occurs. So I met Jerry Grace, and I met Donna Belk, and Char Barrett, and all of the people you've seen here. And I said, I'm going to California. And so I went to California and did Jerry Grace's training, 2 trips, sort of a residential training all the way through level 3. And when I was doing that training, I discovered the Metta Institute. I think she began with Franca. How many people have heard of the Metta Institute? Okay, good.
Some people.
She read Frank Ostaseski's precepts, which he's now published as the 5 Invitations in his book. I really recommend it. It's wonderful. It is the essence of the Metta Institute, which is no longer sort of meeting as it was, but if you read that book, you will have had, the essence of the Metta experience. So luckily they accepted volunteers at the Metta Institute, not just professionals. In fact, they were very welcoming. And so those 2 trainings were going on kind of simultaneously. And it was there that I discovered what my mission was. And so I brought the importance of mission, the insistence upon looking at where are we headed. And not that couldn't change, but I brought that back So it was really, and our therapist friend brought back from Upaya the things that she was seeing were core to her journey. And Jennifer had aged parents. And so we were going to be caring for her mother, who had advanced Alzheimer's. So we not only had the elders in our group, but we had Jennifer's mother as well that we were going to be caring for. And we had the anthroposophical community where we often would do programs at the school as a container, as a really inspiring container for our programs. And in order to continue meeting, we had to kind of figure out, well, what are we going to talk about? What's our content? What are we drawing people together with? And that's very natural. That's very organic. It is what we love. It is books. It is articles. If you discover that a lot of people in your group have ADD and don't want to read a whole book. So it is films. So we discussed, certain books that we would bring. Poetry became very important to us as something to open and close meetings with, as something to share. As a teacher, I always wanted everybody to leave with something in their hand. It's not very environmentally sound, but it was 2009. So, and so we started a film series very quickly. And in the process of searching for venues for these things, we began to collaborate with other organizations. So we began to connect with the Unitarian Church, with the Episcopal Church in town. Yes. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about our greater community. Okay. So that's the soil of our garden. And of course, you have to start where you are. So what's happening in your community and who is part of your community? So as I said, we had the anthroposophical community, which had the long-standing tradition of a vigil, a 3-day vigil. So we were not, we had kindred spirits. We have a large Quaker community in Baltimore, and they were very interested because they have groups that support families who are dealing with end-of-life issues. We have a Shambhala Buddhist community, of which I was a member, and they, of course, are also are always involved in contemplating impermanence. And as it turned out, the leader of the Shambhala community, the Sakyong, sent out a directive that that groups should form circles to support people at end of life. So all of these things sort of have come together. We have lots of hospitals and universities in Baltimore, so there's integrative health programs and facilities in Baltimore. We connected with them for resources and also as sites to offer programs. And then there's the cultural groups in our environment. We've been more successful with some than others. We all live some of us live in the city and some of us live in the suburbs. So the churches we've connected with and the homes we've met in, et cetera, the care facilities, I volunteer in nursing homes. They were mostly in the suburbs. And Baltimore itself is 60% African American. So that is a group that we have over the years really, really tried to build connections with, and we are making slow progress, but there is some progress. But we have learned that we have a lot to learn about how to connect with that community. We have a lot of listening to do. We have a lot of going to meetings and just absorbing, what's going on here, and what can we learn from them? What can they offer us, and what can we offer them? So that's where we are with that community. You heard Fabio yesterday. He is a social worker that I identified at Gilchrist Hospice, where we work, as somebody who would be a wonderful resource for us. So he has offered programs for us, and he's spectacular. really engaging. And he is also he's involved in outreach efforts with the African American community and with the Latino community. And he comes from Brazil, where home funerals are still practiced. So he has that connection. We have a Pakistani community that is quite active in end-of-life care. They've started their own crematoriums, and we have a large Jewish community which has been very open to this sort of thing in different ways. So that's a community we're working with. And it's through the people who've come to our programs that we have become connected to them. So did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to.
Okay.
When you finish the story, I'll.
Okay. All right.
Pieces.
Sorry. So our initial focus came from the group, and then it changes every time we interact with one of these groups. If we have the Christian church community leader come and talk to us, or we go and talk to her, we identify things that we would like to work on. If we have someone from the African American community, a nurse, come to one of our trainings, as we did recently, who says, we need you to come into our community. I will connect you with the community leaders. We work through her. So that's how our structure has evolved. The other key part of structure is who are going to be your leaders. What is your support? And that was pretty simple. Who's doing the work? Mm-hmm. Who's showing up? Sharon is showing up. We are discovering what Sharon has to offer. And Sharon is discovering what Sharon has to offer. And the same with Kim, who luckily she moved from Boston. She left Peg and she came to us. Yeah. Yes.
Nina.
And the same is true with sort of other members. And Jennifer, my original co-founder, was very involved in the process. And then with the death of her mother, and then fast upon that, the birth of her first grandchild and her daughter moving home, life happens. So that was a key element, is that someone has to take a year off, step off the advisory board because her father is dying, and someone comes on to take their place, and we discover different potentialities. So let me hand it over to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Lee is fantastic telling the stories. I am not fantastic with the stories. I'm a little bit more like, let's pull the pieces now from the stories. And so you heard a lot: community, you heard networking, you heard discovery, you heard just kind of being open and organic and just with the flow. So I just want to take us back now, as some of that settles, to the beginning here, just to talk a little bit about that soil that Lee was talking about, to have you begin to start thinking and talking about that. Because again, we're going to do a little exercise so that you actually can walk away with something. Your next step, whether it's to begin to think about a circle, or if you have something going, what your next step is. So as Lee talked about the soil, right, your personal soil and your community soil. Personal soil is really kind of your foundation and where you are. What's your level of awareness? Whoa, I almost fell over. And your comfort with end-of-life care. Clearly, we wouldn't be here if we didn't have a comfort with that, but just really even beginning to think about that. How did that come about? Where are you now? What draws you inside to want to even form a circle? Just let some of these questions settle and sink in. What do you see as your role? Lee talked a little bit about some of the roles. How open are you to discover, to kind of go with the flow, to be okay if people come and go because life happens? So some questions to just kind of let sink in for yourself personally about why you even want to do this. And then the community piece. what's already happening in your community? Lee mentioned lots of groups that we're tapped into here in the Baltimore area. Who's in your area? You know, what are some organizations that you could really tap into? How ready is your community for something like this? Are there potential members that are like, what? Or, oh, okay, let me hear more about this. You know, so is there kind of pre-work you need to do? What's already happening that you may be able to tap into? So you're not recreating the wheel, so to speak. That there are some things maybe that are already happening that you can tap into. And a lot of times we don't take the time to kind of sit with some of that stuff. So we'll be able to assess some of that, but just let some of those questions kind of sink in. What is, you know, Lee talked about the role of our group. What do you have a sense that you want the role to be? What is your focus? Is it on providing direct service for home funerals to families? Is it education to the community? Is it a hybrid? Is it something else? Is it, you know, showing movies and book clubs? I mean, it's any and all of that. So I think that also speaks to it's not a one-size-fits-all model, but really just being able to, as I said in the beginning, generating more questions than the 10-step process. But you have a sense of the experience that we've had here. Lee talked a little bit about recruiting members. And one of the pieces that, as we move into that master gardener role example that Lee was speaking about, is that once we have our garden, or once we have our soil, you know, it needs to kind of be tilled maybe with some of these questions, both personally and from our community, is that now then we get to decide or begin to explore what are the plants that we want in our garden, or the flowers maybe, or a combination. And that obviously speaks to the individuals that are going to be a part of the circle. And so again, sitting with who do you already know that may be interested? Who's expressed an interest? What strengths do they bring? What gifts? Do they want to do a website? Do they want to do hands-on home funeral work? Do they want to be the one to, you know, coordinate a death cafe or a film series? So being able to pull in a variety of people so that you can then move forward with your circle with a focus.
Yeah.
With a focus.
Yeah. And so the focus, I want to emphasize, the vision and the focus for us came from lineage. You know, when I did these trainings with first Jerry Grace in California, and then with the Meta Institute, and then with Olivia Barham down in LA, I decided we are getting them to Baltimore. So we took a big risk. Can we attract enough people who will pay the money, you know, in our region, in the Mid-Atlantic region, to come and do this training? And I knew that, you know, we would discover, you know, Beth Knox was already in Maryland. I knew that there were, and Crossings at that point was very active, and there were a lot of people involved. So I just felt the energy was there, that, you know, that it was a really good spot to start our group. And so we took the risk, and we happened to have a family farm in, you know, out in the country, really beautiful, where we could, for free, house 20-some people. And so we invited Jerry Grace and did a retreat-style training out at this farm. So finding circumstances that will enable you to take these leaps of faith and say, yes, we can attract 20 people, or, you know, in each of these teachers that you want to have. I mean, I'm very interested now in getting Mary Lynn Rush to come and teach us about her doula work. And they will tell you, these people will tell you, I need a minimum of X, it's going to take me this number of days, and you learn to do this. It is not rocket science. You know, April, you were in our group, our first group with Jerry Grace. So, yeah. And so from these trainings, the values and the goals that we have adopted became clear. For example, from Jerry Grace, we got the importance of the emotional journey, the intimacy and the emotional healing that can take place with a home funeral. We got we definitely got the sort of green burial and greening death emphasis, that value, and the financial benefits as well. We also, from Jerry Grace, and I don't know how many of you were in her body care session, but we got process. We got the pace of training, what works. We got, and even how to work with families. And we got topics and techniques, and just like the National Home Funeral Alliance says, go to our website, take that PowerPoint, plug it in, and use it. These teachers say, take my work. Give me credit, but take my work. And so that's what we've done. We've adopted advanced directive workshops. And now we're really sort of launched on our own, and we have many resources in Baltimore. We even got the fellow who developed Maryland's advanced directive form to come and present. And he loved it. He was used to having, classrooms of 200 lawyers, and he got to work with an intimate group in the Shambhala Center. So, people will be very glad to come, and often for, very little or nothing. Mm-hmm. So, whatever you can give them as an honorarium. We also took the idea of the, sorry, question.
I'm just wondering, maybe you have plans to say, but what is your group's connection to direct service? Like, does a family call you and say, we'd like your help? Is that set up within your group in some way?
Yes. So before we started offering the workshops, one of our elders who lived in a nursing home, went into hospice care. And so I was her volunteer through Gilchrist Hospice. I was her doula. And her daughter had downloaded the Crossings Care Handbook, and she said, I'm totally prepared. And then when she died, she called me and she said, I'm unmoored. I need your help. So that was our first home funeral. And just as that was sort of, she knew about our work, everyone who came to her home funeral, to the vigil, heard about it. We have gotten, families have connected to us through that. We have now we have a website. Initially, we used Jennifer's website, another organization. So yes, people hear through word of mouth. When you collaborate with a group like the Unitarian Church, like the Episcopalian Church, we've had guest speakers who were so big and expensive that we decided, okay, we're going to Towson University, connect with their gerontology department. So we've gotten requests to teach their students, and students in those classes have referred people to us for home funeral support and consultation. So yes, it's
Yes.
all of the above.
And I think in answering your question, we have a couple of arms. We have the direct service with families that want home services, and we have an educational arm, which includes a lot of what Lee has mentioned.
So it's public education, and it's educating ourselves.
Right.
And it's ongoing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is another piece in terms of the plants, right? Maintaining the trainings, the up-to-date information, the sharing among the members of the group. So whatever that might look like, formally, informally, bringing speakers, as Lee mentioned, Jerry Grace and Beth, or it may be someone in our community. I mean, it was wonderful to have that the gentleman who wrote the Maryland Healthcare Directive come and speak, and then we've spoken at conferences. So I think that the opportunities are there. I think we just have to tap into, with a sense of what is it that your group wants to be doing. Mm-hmm. What is it? And it could be a hybrid like us. I mean, I have a real huge desire to do a lot of public education and also education within our piece. Yes, certainly I'll do home funerals for families, but I'm also defer to some other members of our group who really want to do that. So I think each of us finding what works for us. And so again, kind of attracting the variety of plants into your garden. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but because of that reason, how do you keep track of your membership? Do you have an official membership roster, or do you have some kind of a loop, email loop, or Facebook page, or any way to keep?
I mean,
That is
pretty
a
much
really
that's
good
Question.
So you know who has what skills, and also, you know, who to contact, or how can they contact you?
My question was also along with that, just how does it actually work, you know, and do you have a financial base to do all these things, or is it all volunteer? Do you have to
Great
do
questions.
fundraising?
Okay, sure.
Yes.
All right, membership question first. There has been a resistance to having members. When we branched off from Jennifer's, you know, sort of original offering programs for people in the second half of life, we decided Threshold Support Circle was her first program, and it just grew. It became its own entity. So when we branched off, we examined these questions of membership and how we're going to, and clarifying our mission and how we're going to financially support this. And there was a resistance to having members. I called up the Threshold Care coordinators in Viroqua, Wisconsin, and you know, we did a Skype interview, and so they're part of the lineage too, and they said, well, we're a collaborative, and we're under an umbrella organization which can receive donations, and so that's how we organize it in our state. We don't have that in Maryland, and so, and our group did not want to have membership. They wanted to be, to feel free to join in meetings, to join in programs, and some of them were more interested in serving families and in trainings. And others were more interested in the relationships that would be built by meeting regularly and in sharing the building of the group. So we call ourselves a permeable circle. And the circle opens and welcomes people, and then we consider people friends of Threshold Support Circle. And so they're on the mailing list, and we keep now it's, you know, it's a somewhat formal list of people and their skills.
That's what I was wondering. That's what I was going with it. Like,
Yeah.
you mentioned several
Beginning
times
to-
everyone has different skills, and I think, well,
Yes.
unless you had that written down somewhere, how would you know? You can't keep it all up here. That's what I was
Yeah.
like, do you have
Yes, when we could
Just-
no longer keep it all up here,
Yeah,
we started
to be
to
able
keep
to-
a record
right,
of it.
right.
They
Yes.
know who to call. Yeah. Okay.
You know, and
Yes.
it's not like, you know, there's 100 members that float in and out. So, you know, we're continuously, that spiral Lee talked about, we're continuously kind of growing the group, and then life happens for people, and then they show up. They need to step out for a bit, sometimes for a short term, sometimes for a long term. And so then it just seems that the right people then kind of come back in. It's certainly not, we sit back and go, well, let's wait for people to see about us. No, we're continuing to be out there in education. But yeah, as it grows, certainly more of a structured way to kind of keep
Right, so you
track
can,
of people.
You can identify what
Exactly.
people might have.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let me address
also
the financial
Financial piece,
question,
yeah.
because that's really important.
You did have an advisory board.
Yes.
Right.
And decision-making structure if you're, don't have it, yeah.
Yes. So the
A triangle.
Viroqua group was very sort of traditional in their organizational structure, and they rotated the leadership, the president's role. But you know, they have a treasurer and a secretary, etc. And there was resistance to that kind of formality in the early stages of Threshold Support Circles. So, you know, I took notes. I sent meeting summaries, and that's how the record came to be. We kept the materials from our trainings. I kept the materials from our trainings, etc. Also, too, I was the one that decided on how the financial underpinnings would come to be. So I formed an LLC in order for us to be able to invoice for our consultations with families, and an LLC in Maryland, I don't know if this is true in other states as well, but cannot accept donations. So that is a sticking point that has eventually forced us to be in the process of forming a nonprofit.
Profit.
So that's where we are now. But that cannot occur until you have the people who are grounded, who are committed to your group. And life has just not, until this moment, it has not been such that we had the number of people to do that. You know, I'm about to turn 65. I was not going to do it by myself. You know, I want other people who are younger, have other energy, you know, sort of, and have experience. And Sharon and Kim bring experience with nonprofits and businesses of various sorts. So it's now sort of a magical time when we feel we can make this commitment.
So you say you receive invoice from families, so you are charging families for your services? We
charge for consultations, and if we go get dry ice, we charge for the dry ice. And for the services that the National Home Funeral Alliance has very clear guidelines on what what services you can charge for. We have, you know, we had an annual retreat. We all agreed we would now call ourselves, whether we loved the words or not, home funeral guides. We would, you know, allow other language, but we would identify as that, and that we would only charge for those services. And we had somebody who decided to leave the group because she really wanted to use other language and she wanted to charge for other services. And that, you know, that was an interesting journey to explore that.
So did you charge, if you help in a home funeral vigil setting for 3 or 4 days, do you charge at all?
We charge for facilitation services, et cetera. So, you know, if we help them, you know, set up things in the home, if we help them with paperwork, yes. Some of us charge and some of us don't. I do not charge because it's a part of my Buddhist practice. But other people are welcome to, you know, when it's appropriate. Mm-hmm.
And that's not cause problems with the community that some people charge and others don't?
You mean our community at large?
Yeah. Because one family might say, well, I wasn't charged for someone caring for my home funeral, mm-hmm. and then another family would say, well, I was. So has that caused, to me that would, I live in a small community, that would cause a problem.
Well, anyone who has had a consultation has paid for the consultation. Okay. And not everyone has had a consultation. I have not yet charged for phone consultations. I know that Beth Knox does charge for phone consultations. You know, that may be in the future. Have you all noticed any concerns about that? Different
no, I don't.
Families having different experiences?
No. What I notice now of how we are working with the home funeral movement is that there is a core collective of our group. So it began with the inception of the advisory committee, knowing that there had to be a smaller group that made the big decisions, that decided how are we going to move forward and then plan those steps forward. And then out from the advisory committee is our core group of trainees, who are people who are trained in home funerals. And so when we do get calls in for home funerals, which unfortunately aren't as often as we would like, the way that we're structured now is that, you know, most of the people working full-time jobs have families and other commitments, and so a call goes out that says, we have a family, they need someone now, and whoever is available generally goes. And because of the nature of our circle, it's usually very much on a volunteer basis. If someone has a specific relationship directly to a family that they've been working with all along, then it's up to them to decide how they charge. So we allow the greater home funeral community within our larger group to have personal relationships that they can charge for. And then beyond that, we have people who attend our trainings and our films and want to come and learn more about it, but that's kind of the more organic piece that they were talking about, that some people will come in and some people will leave. But we do have the core group of home funeral guides.
Yes. And a lot of the other services, and even for home funeral families, is we accept donations. You know, so if it's a film series or if it's a home funeral, you know, we're able to accept donations. Is that correct?
Only because we're in the process of becoming a nonprofit.
A nonprofit, right.
Yeah.
Yes, Janet had a question.
I just have a question. I have a vision, and I don't know if it falls under the threshold care groups or not. To my knowledge, in my region, I'm the only home funeral guide there. Never done a home funeral, so I'm very green. But so I had this vision that I want every single church and community group up and down the seacoast of New Hampshire to have home funeral guides in their church or community group, so that when something happens, they go to their people, whoever loves them, sees them maybe on a weekly or monthly basis. So that's sort of like my vision to do that. And to do that, I was sort of thinking, you know, the educational, I've done some of the educational training already, but just to go into those settings and almost like, here you go, let's have an all-day workshop, sort of set up something similar and then walk away. Have you seen a model like that before? Would it work?
You know, you are really lucky to come from New Hampshire, because you have the New Hampshire, you know, funeral resources group, Lee's group, and you know, many of those people are here at this program conference. So I would really consult them. I know that it is because it happened to us. I mean, I had a one-day training and then I did a home funeral, and you know, it worked. And so that can be done. I think you probably need a key person in that group that might maintain contact with you. You know, we need to nurture each other, and you know, you would need to leave them with something, you know, a guide and some ideas about things that you think help to ground something, to establish it in that, you know, to plant the seeds in that soil. So I don't see why that wouldn't work.
We heard, I think it was at Zenith last night, human relationships, human connections, reaching out and just having the conversations, planting that seed, and then, yeah. Does anyone else have experience with the model that Janet's speaking about?
I've had a little bit, because I've
maybe
had the same vision, in many ways, because a lot was falling on just me, like Lee was saying.
Yeah.
You know, being the only one, and knowing that it should be a collective and a community effort. It's the nature of this work is community, rather than one person, you know, saying, I'm gonna do this for you. And that's kind of similar to the funeral industry model. I'm gonna do this for you, right? So even if you're a home funeral guide, if you set yourself up, and I became a licensed funeral director, so, you know, people started looking to me to do it for them. And that's not in the model, in my heart, really. So I have the same vision with churches, and I think that it could be a wonderful vision. But I think I've tried it, and it doesn't necessarily keep going. Like people get really excited at first, and then, you know, as life happens, it kind of falls apart. So it does, like Lee was saying, it has to be like you choose someone who's very excited at that church and can hold it. You can generate the seeds, but then that person really has to hold it and make it keep happening. And then you could perhaps become kind of a consultant, you know, like a back person that person can call if you feel comfortable with that, so that they then don't feel alone and aren't feeling like they're holding it, right? So it's circle after circle, widening circles. Is kind of the
multi-level marketing, it sounded like.
That's good, yeah.
Not
Yeah,
marketing,
yeah,
really
exactly.
But that care and feeding piece is really important.
Yeah.
And so if you then offer them a couple times a year, maybe even just once a year, a wonderful program, you know, that, you know, all different kinds of things that can help them keep that work alive in their community, that can be, you know, useful tools, but also spiritually nurturing, because that spiritual component is really important for us to have our own ground that allows us to continue to do this kind of work. Yeah.
So in the essence of time, just want to kind of pull together all that we said, and then allow you to begin to have your own experience of wherever you are now, to just take the next step so you can walk out of here either with connections or with a sense of what you need to do back in your own community. So pulling it together, what does it mean to start a threshold support group? Examining your own foundation, your own motivation. Why do you want to do this? Who's in your community to connect with? What's already established? What focus or service are you interested in providing or having the group provide? Obviously, some of the logistics that, as we already heard, there's no one size fits all when you're talking about kind of bringing people into the circle. Trainings, whether that's bringing people in, training within, whatever, there's all kinds of models. The leadership structure, we just happen to have a 3-person advisory board with, a number of volunteers and other home funeral guides. It's not the only way to do it. So just really sit with what is going to work for you and your community. And then Lee just touched a bit on maintaining the group. Certainly because it feels like there's a lot of questions about kind of getting it started and getting it rolling, but the important pieces around self-care. For you as the individual, maybe that initially begins it, for the group so that people feel connected. Gratitude, certainly, and we're all coming from a heart-centered, so it's not like that's something that's going to be difficult for any of us, but just the reminders of that, appreciation for the members of the group, connecting in with your community, collaborations, co-hosting different events and things. So just really being mindful that there's a lot out there in terms of maintaining things, hearing from the people that are interested. They come with some needs and wants. It's like, oh, we hadn't thought about that. Sure, let's get someone together to do a training around that. Or, we've talked I've spoken to a number of you over the weekend about, even just starting with a book club. Let's just choose a book. Stephen Jenkinson comes to mind, Die Wise. It's like, let's all read that together. As we all know, the National Home Funeral Alliance, put all these together. These are invaluable. So we have taken time to read sections and work together around some of these things and work through them.
That book, Undertaken with Love, says it all about how to start a support group.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. And the education part, whatever that might look like. So again, I don't think we can stress enough, and Lee said it beautifully, and I'll just reiterate. It's this constant flow of creation, of shifting depending on life and people, because we're working with humans, recreation again, and I love your, the kind of the spiraling. You start in one place, you have a vision, you have a sense, but people come in, they have ideas. You have kind of that foundation though of what you want to be doing and who you want to be serving, but then being open and just, just paying attention to, for our garden metaphor, kind of what season are you in? Is this a season of planting and you're trying to recruit folks? Is this a season where it's like things are a little quieter now? It's maybe the winter and things you've planted or have died and now are kind of going to be regerminating after the winter months. Just kind of really pay attention to those seasons. So flexibility, adaptability, and comfort with impermanence, right? Comfort with the impermanence of, here's my vision. So let's jump in. We have a few minutes left. So I just want to invite you to just, if you want to put your things down, because you're going to actually be writing back again, but just get yourself comfortable, whatever that feels to you. And if it feels comfortable to close your eyes, feel free to do so. And just take a moment. Just begin to just take a couple deep breaths. Kind of shared a lot of stuff, and I know there's a lot more bubbling for people. I can just feel the energy. So just sit for a moment. Just take a deep breath. Get yourself grounded here. Feel your feet on the floor. The breath coming in and coming out. Just aware as you're sitting in the chair of allowing it to support you. There's nothing you need to do. The chair is holding you. Just be aware of the sounds that you can hear in the room, up close, distance. Just open up your big awareness. And just allow now to just bubble up. Maybe a thought, a feeling, a body sensation, an image, a sound, anything. There's no right or wrong how it shows up for you, but just begin to invite in and allow your threshold support group to show itself to you. Whatever way that is, just allow it. Don't try to fix anything. Just allow what comes. Might be a word, feeling, image. And just, we're going to invite a little conversation here with our threshold circle. However it showed up to you, just ask it what it needs from you. What does it need for you to do? What does it need for you to know as your next step? Keep breathing and just allow whatever comes up. And if nothing comes up, that's something. Just allow it. What does your circle need to know? What does it want from you? Ask it, how rich is the soil? What type of garden? What variety of plants is your circle wanting right now? We're only talking right now. And who already in your community is available? Allow your circle to tell you who in your community is available to connect with, to collaborate with, to open a conversation with. And again, just allow whatever comes up, an image, a metaphor, sound, a word, a body feeling. And just continue breathing just for another minute or so. And when you're ready, come back into this time and space. If you want to jot down any notes or anything so you'll remember when you leave here about what your next step is or anything that just emerged that your circle shared with you. I'll just give folks a little minute to write anything down. Just another minute or so, 30 seconds to just wrap up your thoughts. Great. So we would just love if people want to just share, just kind of a little popcorn style, if anyone wants to share what their next step is, what they're walking away with, anything that came up in that exercise, just kind of the essence of what that is. You know, not a whole big story about it because we don't have a lot of time, but just kind of the essence, and then we'll have Q&A. So if anyone wants to share, could also cross-pollinate. You know, people could say, "Oh, I didn't think of that." So, yeah, Evan.
So structure is to work with, undertake with love. That's the plan. But the new arising is focusing the first meeting on inviting people's gifts and interests and their sense of purpose and calling for being a part of that in order to allow that to guide us forward.
Love that, Evan. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone? Yeah, Janet.
I received this beautiful picture of this end product of this massive interfaith picnic. People crying and laughing and sharing, and just the gratitude of everybody that together. So.
Beautiful. Thank you. Anyone else? Either one.
Asking my women friends if they're interested in examining, creating a threshold group for ourselves, families.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. Anyone else? Great. Does it? Yeah.
When Lee was talking, I think what it did for me was actually clarify what I already had.
Yes.
In terms of structure-wise and organisationally-wise, how I can then use that and then what's in here. So.
Good, good. Yes.
What I've been thinking about is I do Death Cafe Santa Barbara, and a lot of single older people come, and I feel a lot of loneliness there. And I was just thinking, on a small scale, I know it's not a platform, Death Cafe isn't a platform, but I could just say, if anybody's interested in forming another kind of group, and I like the idea of kind of helping the lonely population.
Such richness.
I'm having an idea on her idea.
Okay. Yeah, sure, of course.
So one of the greatest things we did was to have a death over dinner party. It's actually, it's an entity, and we, got the cards and everything. We sort of played with it, and as we've done with Death Cafe, we have Dine to Talk
cafes,
so that we don't really have to be limited, and we can share resources, etc. But Death Cafes also happen in Baltimore. But if, we had a death over dinner party right around the time of the Day of the Dead, and we invited different friends, and a lot of people didn't know one another, but you could do that, and you could have people bring a dish to share kind of thing, and you could piggyback it on one of these Death Cafes, and or have the invitation there anyway. And then you're sharing food like you do at a Death Cafe, but it's a little longer. It's an opportunity to maybe even bring a question in, or bring something besides food to share, or you can even use the cards from one of these wonderful games like My Gift of Grace, etc., Death Over Dinner. Use those topics to generate discussion, to build connections between the people who come. Yeah, it was really a fun event.
Okay. Yeah, Lucinda.
I wanted to just add that because I am very aware that there are a lot of older single people who want this kind of alternative care, that they feel a little bit despairing that they can't have it because they don't have family or they don't have a community that they, it's really hard to ask. And so the more that those kinds of groups are forming for them, the better chance that they'll have that kind of care.
Beautiful.
So I think it's crucial work, really.
Beautiful.
I feel like that's the path I'm going to be on, because I don't want to think that my husband's going to pass away, before me. But the reality, possibly will. And we don't have children, and so going to this, I know what I want for my disposition. So I want to create something to kind of ensure that I can have that in my community, because we have nothing like that.
And
Beautiful.
community meaning neighborhood, meaning city, town.
It's, well,
Religious.
I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, which is a big little city.
Mhm.
That's the best way to describe it. And it's forward thinking on some things and very backwards thinking and others. So I'm trying, education is going to be my biggest focus because it's almost a daunting task. But starting with education, I think, is going to be planting the seeds in order to spread.
In a lot of places that small towns or in the south, in farming areas, the tradition is there. You just have to wake it up. You just have to remind them what their grandparents or great-grandparents did.
Yeah.
So.
And one step at a time. Listen to the wisdom in the room here, right? The richness that one person shared. So let's use each other. Let's support each other. Yeah, Carrie, you had a question?
I just wanted to share a different perspective for me, because you mentioned instead of starting something new, I'm going to go knock on some doors, because I know that there's a Christian community in my county that does home funerals. So I want to see if they'll let me in to find out a little more of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we also do have a Waldorf school in our county, so I'm wondering what that community's doing, and I want to see if I can learn from them and kind of bridge to make it more available to anyone who would like the option.
Great.
Perfect. Wow. Such richness, huh, Lee?
Yes.
This is beautiful,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. It's the garden.
It's the
right
garden. Here we are. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.